In my 35 years on the bench here in Providence, Rhode Island, I've seen just about everything walk through those courtroom doors. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment when a police chief stood in my courtroom, face red with rage, screaming at one of his own officers like he was something he'd scraped off his shoe. I'm Judge Frank Caprio, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just another case. This is about what happens when power corrupts a man so completely that he forgets the very oath he swore to uphold. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button right now, because justice like this doesn't happen every day. It started on a Tuesday morning, ordinary as any other. I walked into my courtroom, said my hellos to Inspector Quinn, God bless him, he's been with me for years, and settled onto the bench with my coffee. The docket that morning looked routine. Parking violations mostly, a few traffic citations, the kind of municipal matters I've been handling since before some of you were born. But then I saw a name that made me pause. Officer Michael Torres versus Chief of Police Robert Callahan. A police officer had filed a complaint against his own chief. That alone told me something unusual was brewing. When Officer Torres walked in, I could see immediately he was nervous. He was young, maybe late 20s, in his dress uniform, but his hands were shaking slightly as he held a folder of documents. Behind him came Chief Callahan, and let me tell you something, my friends. I've spent decades reading people, and this man walked in like he owned not just the room, but everyone in it. Expensive suit, that swagger some men get when they've had authority too long. He didn't even glance at Officer Torres. That bothered me right away. Good morning, gentlemen, I said, keeping my tone warm but professional. Officer Torres, you've brought a complaint regarding a parking citation issued to Chief Callahan. Is that correct? Torres cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. On March 15th, I was conducting routine parking enforcement on Federal Hill when I observed the chief's personal vehicle parked in a clearly marked no parking zone in front of Angelo's restaurant. The vehicle was blocking a fire hydrant and had been there, according to the restaurant owner, for over 40 minutes during lunch service. Before I could respond, Callahan's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. This is a waste of the court's time, Judge. Officer Torres here doesn't understand how things work. I held up my hand. Chief Callahan, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Right now I'm listening to Officer Torres. Continue, officer. I saw Torres swallow hard. Whatever this young man was about to say, it was costing him something to say it. I've seen that look before, the look of someone doing the right thing even when it's terrifying. It reminded me of my father, who came to this country with nothing, who taught me that integrity isn't convenient, it's necessary. Your Honor, when I approached the vehicle to issue the citation, Chief Callahan exited the restaurant. I explained the violation respectfully. That's when Torres paused, and I could see his jaw tighten. That's when he told me I'd better tear up that ticket if I knew what was good for me. The courtroom went silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. And did you? I asked gently. Did you tear it up? No, sir. I completed the citation and placed it on the windshield. It's my job to enforce the law equally, regardless of who violates it. I nodded slowly, feeling something swell in my chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. Here was a young officer who understood something that some people in positions of power forget. The law isn't a suggestion for some people and a mandate for others. If you're moved by what you're hearing, leave a comment below telling me about a time you stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That's when Chief Callahan exploded. This is absurd. His voice boomed through my courtroom and I saw his face flush crimson. Judge, this kid has been on the force for less than 3 years. He doesn't have the experience or the judgment to... Chief Callahan, I interrupted, and my voice carried that tone I reserve for when someone forgets where they are. In this courtroom, we speak respectfully, and we speak when recognized. Do you understand? He glared at me, and for a moment I wondered if he was going to challenge me right there, but he bit back whatever he was about to say and gave a curt nod. Now, I continued, turning back to Torres, you issued the citation. What happened next? Torres opened his folder with trembling hands. The following day, I was called into the chief's office. What happened there is documented in this formal complaint I filed with Internal Affairs. He handed papers to the clerk, who brought them to me. As I read, my blood went cold. According to Torres's detailed account, Chief Callahan had called him into his office, closed the door, and spent 20 minutes berating him. The language documented was vile, words I won't repeat in this courtroom or anywhere else. But what struck me most was this. Callahan had allegedly told Torres that he owned him, that Torres was his pig to command, and that if Torres didn't learn his place, his career in law enforcement was over before it started. Officer Torres, I said quietly, these are serious allegations. Do you have any corroboration? He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Officer Sarah Mitchell was in the hallway outside the chief's office. The walls are thin. She heard everything and has provided a written statement. Another document was handed up. I read Officer Mitchell's statement. It confirmed every word and added something else. This wasn't the first time she'd heard the chief speak to junior officers this way. It was, she wrote, part of the culture of fear he's created. I looked at Chief Callahan. Is this true? Did you speak to Officer Torres this way? And that's when he made the biggest mistake of his career. So what if I did? Callahan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I've been in law enforcement for 28 years, Judge. I've earned the right to run my department the way I see fit. These young officers today, they think they can disrespect command, that they can embarrass their superiors over a parking ticket. He needs to learn that there's a chain of command, and I'm at the top of it. Inspector Quinn, standing by the door, caught my eye. His expression said everything. He was disgusted, and I was too. Chief Callahan, I said, and I could feel my heart pounding. Let me ask you something. When you took your oath as a police officer, what did you swear to do? He blinked, thrown by the question. To uphold the law and protect the community. That's right, I said. To uphold the law, not to be above it, not to use your position to intimidate and abuse those who serve under you. Officer Torres did exactly what he was supposed to do. He enforced the law without favoritism, and instead of respecting that, you tried to destroy him for it. Your Honor, Callahan started, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished. My voice was firm now, carrying 35 years of seeing both the best and worst of humanity. You called this young man your pig. You told him you owned him. Let me tell you what I see when I look at Officer Torres. I see a man with integrity. I see someone who understands that the badge he wears isn't a license for power. It's a responsibility to serve. I see the kind of officer every community deserves. The courtroom was completely silent. I could see people in the gallery leaning forward, and somewhere in the back I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Before I tell you what I decided to do, hit that like button if you believe that no one, not even those in power, should be above the law. Share this video if you know someone who needs to see what real accountability looks like. Chief Callahan, I continued, you're here because you violated a parking ordinance. The fine for that is $150, but what concerns me far more is what happened afterward. Your abuse of power, your attempt to intimidate an officer for doing his job. That's not something I can address directly in this courtroom, but I can and will make sure the appropriate authorities know about it. Callahan's face went from red to pale. You're going to what? I'm referring this matter to the mayor's office, the city council, and the state police internal affairs division. Your behavior, as documented in these statements, represents a betrayal of public trust. You've created what Officer Mitchell calls a culture of fear in a department that's supposed to protect people, not terrorize its own members. I saw Torres's eyes widen. He hadn't expected this. To be honest, neither had I when I walked in this morning. But I've been doing this for 35 years, and if there's one thing my father taught me, God rest his soul, it's that when you see something wrong, you don't look away just because it's easier. Furthermore, I said, the parking citation stands. You'll pay the fine plus court costs. But more importantly, Chief Callahan, I want you to understand something. I leaned forward, making sure he heard every word. In my courtroom, a sanitation worker and a police chief are equal before the law. A single mother struggling to pay her bills and a wealthy businessman equal before the law. That's not just some idealistic notion. That's the foundation of everything we claim to believe in as Americans. Callahan's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. Is that all, Your Honor? No, I said quietly. There's one more thing. I want you to apologize to Officer Torres. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Callahan looked like I'd asked him to cut off his own arm. Excuse me? You heard me. You abused your position. You verbally assaulted a good officer for doing his job. Before you leave this courtroom, you're going to apologize to him or I'll hold you in contempt. For a long moment, Callahan just stared at me. I could see the war happening behind his eyes, his pride battling against the reality that he'd finally met someone he couldn't bully. The seconds stretched out, and I wondered if I was going to have to follow through on my contempt threat. Then, without looking at Torres, Callahan muttered, I apologize. Look at him, I said firmly. He's standing right there. Look at him and say it like you mean it. Callahan turned slowly toward Torres. The young officer stood at attention, dignified despite everything. I apologize for my behavior, Officer Torres. It wasn't sincere, I could hear that, but it was a start. Sometimes, my friends, you have to force people to do the right thing before they can learn to do it willingly. I've learned that over decades on this bench. Officer Torres, I said, turning to the young man who'd started all this by simply doing his job, I want to thank you. It takes courage to stand up to someone in power, especially in your own department. What you did, refusing to tear up that ticket, filing that complaint, despite knowing it could cost you your career. That's the definition of integrity. Your parents raised you right. I saw his eyes get wet, and he nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The parking citation against Chief Callahan is upheld. Fine and court costs total $175, payable within 30 days. This court is adjourned on this matter. I struck the gavel, but I knew this was far from over. As Callahan stormed out of the courtroom, without paying, I noted, he'd have to come back for that. Inspector Quinn approached the bench. Judge, he said quietly, in all my years here, I've never seen anything like that. Neither have I, Quinn. Neither have I. I felt tired suddenly, the weight of what had just happened settling on my shoulders. Make sure those documents get to the mayor's office today. And Quinn, keep an eye on Officer Torres. Men like Callahan don't take public humiliation well. He nodded and walked away, and I sat there for a moment in my empty courtroom thinking about power and corruption and courage. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to this channel to see more stories from my courtroom where justice and compassion meet, because every day people walk through these doors with stories that need to be heard. 3 weeks later, I was in my chambers when I got a call from the mayor. Chief Callahan had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. 6 more officers had come forward with similar stories of abuse and intimidation. The culture of fear Officer Mitchell had mentioned went deeper than anyone had realized. The state police had opened a formal investigation into the department's practices. Judge Caprio, the mayor said, if Officer Torres hadn't stood up, if you hadn't taken this seriously, we might never have known. We might have had a tyrant running our police department for years to come. When I hung up, I thought about my father again. He came to America with $8 in his pocket and a belief that this country stood for something, that the law protected everyone, not just the powerful, that a man, any man, could stand up for what's right and find justice. 2 months after that courtroom confrontation, Officer Torres came to see me. He knocked on my chamber door nervously, still that same humble young man, but standing a little taller now. Your Honor, I wanted to thank you personally, and to tell you that Chief Callahan resigned last week. The investigation found systematic abuse going back years. They're bringing in a new chief from outside the department to clean house. I stood and shook his hand. You did that, Officer Torres, not me. You're the one who had the courage to issue that ticket and refused to back down. You're the one who filed that complaint knowing what it might cost you. I just made sure people listened. He smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him really smile. My sergeant told me something yesterday. He said that I should be proud, that I'm the kind of officer the department needs. It felt good to hear that, Your Honor. It felt like maybe things really can change. They can, I assured him. They do, but only when good people refuse to stay silent. You remember that, okay? And you keep being exactly the officer you are, honest, courageous, fair. The community needs you. As he left, I sat back down and thought about that morning in March when a police chief had screamed that he owned one of his officers, that he could call him whatever vile names he wanted. And I thought about how one parking ticket, one simple act of treating everyone equally under the law, had brought down a tyrant and given a police department a chance to heal. My friends, I've been doing this job for 35 years, and if I've learned anything, it's this. The law only works when we refuse to bend it for the powerful. Justice only exists when we defend it, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's scary, even when it costs us something. Officer Torres understood that. He risked his career for it. And in the end, he didn't just save himself. He saved every officer who would have served under that chief, every citizen who deserved better. That's what justice looks like. Not perfect, not always satisfying, but real, human, worth fighting for. Before I close, let me ask you something. Hit that like button if you believe good officers like Torres deserve our support. Comment below and tell me, what would you have done if you were Officer Torres? Would you have torn up that ticket to save your career, or would you have stood your ground? And share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up to power is possible, that doing the right thing still matters. A few weeks ago, I got a letter. It was from Officer Torres's mother. She wrote to tell me that her son had been promoted to detective, that the new police chief had personally chosen him for a position in internal affairs, where he could help create the kind of department they all wanted to serve in. She thanked me for seeing her son's courage, for protecting him when he was vulnerable. But here's what I wrote back to her. I didn't protect your son. His integrity protected him. His courage protected him. The law protected him, because he had the faith to believe in it. All I did was make sure the law kept its promise. That's my job, after all, to make sure that when people walk into this courtroom, whether they're a young officer or a police chief, whether they're struggling or successful, whether they're scared or confident, they all stand equal before the law. That's not just my philosophy, that's America at its best. God bless Officer Torres. God bless everyone who chooses courage over comfort. And God bless you for watching, for caring, for believing that justice still matters. Take care of yourself. Be good to each other. And remember, the next time you see something wrong, the next time someone in power tells you to look the away, think of Officer Torres. Think of that parking ticket. Think of what one act of simple, honest courage can change. Because in the end, that's all any of us have. Our choices, our integrity, our willingness to say, even when we're terrified, no, this isn't right, and I won't be part of it. That's the legacy I want to leave from my years on this bench. That's the Providence I want to be part of. A place where doing the right thing isn't just celebrated, it's protected. Where a young officer can hold a chief accountable, and where an old judge can make sure that accountability has teeth. If you made it this far, you're part of this story now too. So tell me, what will you do the next time you see injustice? Comment below. Let's talk about it. Because these conversations, these moments of reflection, that's how we keep the promise alive. But nothing prepared me for what walked into my courtroom next. That's a story for another day, my friends. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, God bless you, and thank you for believing in justice.